1,540 drives, 6 hours and 51 minutes. Every ball traveled at least 225 yards. Every ball finished inside a corridor only 30 yards wide. The man holding the club was Moe Norman. Some of the greatest golfers who ever lived would eventually describe him as a genius. Tiger Woods placed him beside Ben Hogan as one of the rare players who truly owned his swing. Yet Norman played only 2 major championships. He withdrew from one. He missed the cut in the other. His attempt to build a career on the American tour lasted only a few months. That was the contradiction. Golf may have produced no one better at repeatedly striking the center of a club face, but the professional game had almost no place for him. Most people saw a strange swing. The people who stood behind him on a practice range saw something else. A ball leaving on the same line, at the same height, with the same sound. Again, and again, and again. Moe said he had hit approximately 5 million golf balls during his lifetime. He remembered the yardages of 375 courses. He claimed that during one 11-year period, only one drive went out of bounds, and that one missed by 2 feet. Those numbers came from Moe himself, so they cannot all be independently audited, but they fit the public record. 33 course records, 17 holes in one, multiple rounds of 59, dozens of victories in Canada. The evidence did not suggest a lucky golfer. It suggested a level of control that the sport still struggles to explain. The question was never whether Moe Norman could hit a golf ball. The question was why a man with that ability spent much of his career sleeping in cars, carrying his own bag, and working winter jobs to survive. Why did recognition arrive so late? Why did the money appear only after his competitive years were nearly over? And why did the golf industry eventually learn how to sell the method of a man it had once treated as a spectacle? To understand that, the story has to return to Kitchener, Ontario. Not to a private academy, not to a country club family, to a working-class neighborhood near a tire factory, where the air reportedly carried the smell of burning rubber and money was always scarce. Norman began with a tree branch, then a hockey stick, then an old 5-iron he purchased by paying 10 cents a week. He was naturally left-handed. The club was right-handed, so he changed sides. The decision was practical. Almost everything in his early life was. He practiced in fields where the grass was too long. He carried battered balls in a bowling bag and cut small hitting areas with his irons. Losing a ball was expensive. Straightness was not an artistic preference. It was economic survival. He kept striking balls until his hands bled. When the grips became slippery, he wiped away the blood and continued. There was no launch monitor, no swing coach, no high-speed camera. The feedback system was brutally simple. The ball was either where he intended it to be, or it was not. By 19, Norman believed he had trapped his swing. His stance was wide. His arms were extended. His hands were unusually high. He placed the club head well behind the ball and held the grip mainly in his palms. The motion looked abbreviated. The contact did not. His club returned to impact with so little variation that decades later, instructors would present the movement as an early model of the single-plane swing. Modern golf uses force plates, 3-dimensional motion capture, and club delivery data to search for repeatability. Norman built his version through exhaustion, one ball at a time. His first significant victory came in 1949. He arrived at a one-day amateur event without an invitation. He wore sneakers, carried 7 clubs in a damaged bag, and was given an empty position in the field. He shot 67. He won by 2. And before the awards dinner, he disappeared. Someone else had to collect his prize. The public saw a new talent. The warning was already there. Professional golf did not merely require good scores. It required ceremonies, introductions, dinners, sponsors, travel, and constant interaction with strangers. Norman could defeat the course. Everything around the course was more difficult. There has never been a confirmed public diagnosis that fully explains Norman's behavior. Friends and writers later speculated about autism. Another theory connected his mannerisms to an untreated childhood head injury after a sledding accident. Neither explanation was conclusively established. What is documented is that he struggled with eye contact, disliked being touched, repeated phrases when nervous, and found unfamiliar social environments overwhelming. Those differences became part of his public image. Sometimes they inspired sympathy. Sometimes they made him a target. Norman won the Canadian Amateur Championship in 1955. He won it again in 1956. The second victory should have secured his position as one of the country's most important golfers. Instead, questions about his amateur status intensified. Norman sold tournament prizes to support himself, a practice that violated amateur rules, even though similar arrangements were reportedly not unusual at the time. The difference was that Moe made little effort to conceal what he was doing. Golf's amateur system was built around the assumption that elite players could compete without needing the money. Norman needed the money. The rule and the reality were moving in opposite directions. He turned professional. Even that required intervention because he lacked the conventional club position normally needed to obtain Canadian PGA status. When he was finally admitted, his first event as a card-carrying professional was the 1958 Ontario Open. He won by 3 shots. The result appeared to settle the argument. It did not. The next logical step was America. Larger fields, larger purses, the best players in the world. In 1959, Norman tried the United States circuit. His putting was inconsistent, but in New Orleans he produced 4 solid rounds, briefly challenged for the lead and tied for 4th. It looked like the beginning. A few days later, he returned to the home of friends in Florida and announced that he would never play the tour again. The exact details were not documented publicly at the time. According to an account later given to Golf Digest, several established professionals confronted Norman in a locker room. They allegedly criticized his clothing, his teeth, and the way he entertained spectators. Norman rarely discussed the incident. One sentence was remembered: "It stopped me from having fun." That account should not be treated like a court finding. The identities of the players were not publicly established, and the episode relies heavily on later testimony. What is confirmed is what happened next. Moe left. The American tour continued without him. There is another side to this. Norman's defenders sometimes describe him as a lost major champion, as though straight driving alone guaranteed that he would have dominated the PGA Tour. The record cannot prove that. His putting could be erratic. Tournament golf demands more than perfect contact. It requires course management, recovery shots, emotional regulation, travel tolerance, and the ability to perform across different conditions for months at a time. Norman also made his own decisions. Canada was familiar. America was not. Perhaps he would never have become a dominant international player. That possibility has to remain open, but it does not remove the larger question. Did the system test the limits of his golf? Or did it reject the presentation before it could measure the player? Back in Canada, Norman kept winning. In 1966, he won 5 events, finished second 5 times, and recorded a scoring average of 69.8, reportedly beating the next best average by 2.5 strokes. From 1979, he won 7 consecutive Canadian PGA Senior Championships. After finishing 5th the following year, he returned and won the next championship by 8. The pattern was consistent. Whenever the environment became familiar, his performance became extraordinary. Yet the money surrounding Canadian tournament golf remained limited. Norman sometimes carried his own bag because he could not afford a caddy. He worked in factories and set pins in a bowling alley. He hitchhiked to tournaments and described sleeping on park benches, in bunkers, and later in his car. Friends organized a benefit tournament in 1987 that reportedly raised $25,000 and prevented his financial position from deteriorating further. One of golf's most admired ball strikers was surviving through charity. The industry knew his name. It had not found a stable way to value him. That changed when his swing became a product. In the 1980s, businessman Jack Kuykendall was developing a simplified golf method based on mechanical efficiency. According to Golf Digest's account, he was eventually shown footage of Norman and discovered that Moe's motion closely resembled the system he had been trying to build. The company became Natural Golf. Norman was no longer merely an eccentric Canadian professional. He was evidence. His body demonstrated that an alternative swing could survive decades of repetition. His history gave the method authenticity. The same motion that had once triggered laughter now had commercial value. Some traditional instructors remained skeptical. They argued that Norman's swing was too individual to copy, a movement created through unusual strength, instinct, and millions of repetitions. His mechanics may have worked brilliantly for him without providing a universal solution. That debate continues, but the business opportunity did not require everyone to agree. It required enough golfers to believe that the conventional swing had become too complicated. Norman represented simplicity. Natural Golf could sell access to that idea. In 1995, Golf Digest placed Norman's story before a much larger audience. He was 66. The competitive career that might have made him famous was effectively behind him. Only now did the broader golf public begin to understand what tour professionals had been whispering for years. Late recognition created a new image. The poorly dressed outsider became the misunderstood genius. The sideshow became the master. The industry had not changed his swing. It changed the story surrounding it. At approximately the same time, money finally became dependable. Acushnet, the parent company of Titleist and FootJoy, began paying Norman a reported $5,000 a month for life. Natural Golf reportedly paid another $3,000 a month. A longtime friend later said the payments removed the pressure to hit balls twice and every day simply to eat. Titleist described its support as a form of late career scholarship, recognition for a man who had used its products for decades. There is no public evidence that the arrangement was improper. By available accounts, it gave Norman security and dignity, but the timing is impossible to ignore. The golf business discovered his financial value after his tournament value could no longer threaten anyone. He had spent decades wearing the logo without a meaningful endorsement. Now the logo was paying him. He had spent decades demonstrating a swing without owning an instruction empire. Now companies could attach products, schools, and teaching systems to his name. That does not make those companies villains. Natural Golf helped preserve his method. Titleist materially improved his final years. Without them, much of Norman's legacy might have remained scattered across practice ranges and private memories. But preservation and commercialization often arrive together. The person becomes the story becomes intellectual property. The outsider becomes a brand. Norman died in 2004 at the age of 75. At his funeral, a Titleist driver and 2 golf balls were placed in his casket. The equipment had been his livelihood, his language, and eventually his financial protection. Even at the end, the man and the product were difficult to separate. Today, golf celebrates many ideas that Moe Norman represented. Single-plane mechanics, customized equipment, repeatable impact, reduced face rotation, heavy clubs built to match an individual movement. Modern players are surrounded by data designed to produce the certainty Norman searched for alone in an empty field. The sport eventually moved toward him, just not quickly enough to build his career around it. That may be the real Moe Norman file, not the story of an undiscovered genius. He was discovered repeatedly, by opponents, by instructors, by equipment companies, by journalists. The problem was what happened after people discovered him. For most of his life, golf could admire his ability without changing the structure that kept him outside. Later, it could celebrate his difference because that difference had become useful. 1,540 drives, 6 hours and 51 minutes. Every ball inside the boundary. The number still sounds impossible, but it is not the number that should make the golf industry uncomfortable. It is the timeline. Maybe Moe Norman arrived too early. Maybe the tour was never designed for someone like him. Or maybe the game understood exactly how valuable he was and only learned to reward him when there was nothing left for him to win.